Reasoning. First of all, we're going to look at what reasoning is and provide a simple definition. We're going to talk about premises and how we move from premises to conclusions. Then we're going to focus on two main types of reasoning: deductive reasoning, we're using deductive arguments, and inductive reasoning for inductive arguments. Finally, we're going to look at two other types of reasoning: abductive and causal. Okay, what do you see? Blue box with a ribbon, something red. Well, that's true. We don't need much reasoning there. But when you saw the blue box, what did you think? Present, perhaps? When you saw the red thing, what did you think? Tomato ketchup? I thought the box was for a present. We can see the wrapping, so I guessed it was a present. Stereotypically, we say pink for girls, blue for boys. So based on my culture and my generation, I thought this was probably a present for a boy. What about the red one? I guessed someone was bleeding. Probably there was an accident. For both of these, I had to use some reasoning. I saw the evidence and then I guessed from the evidence. So I tried to move from the evidence to a conclusion. This process to move from evidence to a conclusion is reasoning. Let's look at a deductive argument. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. Here we have two premises: all men are mortal and Socrates is a man, followed by the conclusion: Socrates is mortal. We know it's a conclusion because there's a logical indicator, in this case the word therefore. Logical indicators we can place before conclusions, and it links the evidence to the conclusion or the premises to the conclusion. For this one, the reasoning is deductive. Why? Well, we start with the premise one, which talks about all men. So here we have the universal case. Then we focus on one instance of the universal case, Socrates. That's one person. So we're going from a general to specific. In this case, the argument's valid, and we're going to say the truth value, we're going to assign it true. In here we have all men are mortal and Socrates is a man. Well, I believe both of those statements are true. Therefore, this is a deductive argument, an argument where the truth of the premises guarantees the truth of the conclusion, i.e., it's valid. Let's look at an inductive argument. We've seen thousands of swans. All the swans were white. Therefore, all swans are white. Here, we're starting with a specific example, or specific examples, thousands of swans. And in the conclusion, we're going to move to the universal case, all swans. So this is the opposite to the deductive argument. The deductive argument started with the universal and moved to a specific or particular case, but the inductive argument is starting with a particular case. The first sentence, the first premise, we've seen thousands of swans. So here the particular case is a large group of swans, thousands. But the conclusion is all swans, which is the universal case. So here we're generalizing from a small group to something else, in this case, the large group itself. Let's look at the reasoning. It's inductive. Why? Because we're going from a particular case. When you make a generalization from a particular case, we're using inductive reasoning. This argument's invalid because it's not deductive. Only deductive arguments can be valid. For the truth value, well, maybe it's true we've seen thousands of swans, and it's true all those swans were white. However, the conclusion is not necessarily true. In the northern hemisphere, swans are white. In the southern hemisphere, swans are black. And in the thousands of swans this person saw, they were all in the northern hemisphere. The conclusion cannot be sound because it's not true and it's not valid, but the conclusion could be cogent if it's got strong evidence. However, because we know there are black swans, the evidence is not so strong, so it's uncogent. Here we see the inductive argument is an argument where the premises point several cases of a pattern, and the conclusion says this pattern will hold in all cases. The truth of the premises in inductive arguments doesn't guarantee the truth of the conclusion. When we compare them together, we can see the biggest difference is that deductive arguments can be valid. Inductive arguments are never deductively valid. They could have true premises and reach a conclusion that still could be false. An abductive argument is maybe an extension of inductive arguments. Here, let's look at this example. These coins conduct electricity. If they're gold coins, they would conduct electricity. Therefore, these coins are made of gold. Well, it's certainly possible that they're gold, but gold is not the only element that conducts electricity. Here the problem is we've guessed it's gold and we've not considered any other possibilities. So what we've got generalizing from a particular case, but we've also got this conditional kind of if. When we look at it, the reasoning here is abductive reasoning. The argument is invalid because it's not a deductive argument. It's not possible to be valid. The truth value in this case is false because actually I can recognize some of these coins and they're not gold. And the conclusion is uncogent because the evidence is weak for the conclusion itself. The abductive argument points out a certain fact, points out if a hypothesis was true, that fact would be reached, and then concludes the hypothesis must be true. However, the truth of premises in inductive arguments doesn't guarantee the truth of a conclusion. When we compare deductive, inductive, and abductive side by side, we can see only deductive results in a valid argument. Inductive and abductive both result in arguments which are not valid. That means they could have true premises but still reach a false conclusion. Let's look at another type of reasoning, causal reasoning, that's used in causal arguments. Here we see possibly the splatter of the blood. I cut my finger, blood dropped on the floor, there's blood on the floor because I cut my finger. Here we move from the cause to the effect, and a causal indicator like because can show the link between cause and effect. In this case, the action or state that resulted in the effect is identified as the cause. So when we see the effect and we guess the cause, this is a causal argument. Okay, so you should be able to tell us what reasoning is. The four types of reasoning: deductive, inductive, abductive, causal. To explain the difference between valid and invalid arguments, sound or unsound, and cogent or uncogent.